Kimberly. I'm an instructor at the Elkridge DIY Center, and today I'll be showing you how to make these Spider-Man royal icing decorations in a step-by-step tutorial. You can use any rolled sugar cookie recipe you want as the base for these decorations. I've linked one example in the description below the video. Alternately, these decorations could be piped onto a sheet of parchment paper and then used on top of cakes or cupcakes. To make the royal icing, you will need some measuring cups and spoons, a mixer, a whisk, and a sifter. The ingredients are 3/4 cup warm water, 5 tablespoons meringue powder, 1 teaspoon cream of tartar, 2 pounds powdered sugar, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla or almond extract if your meringue powder doesn't already have vanilla in it. So in the mixer bowl, we're going to pour our 3/4 cup warm water and our meringue powder. Five tablespoons of meringue powder. I have a big one because I do this a lot. You definitely don't need this big of a mixture of meringue powder. They do sell much smaller containers. Then we are going to whisk that together until it is frothy and thickened. It's about 30 seconds. I'm just going to use a hand whisk and whisk it all together. So this is what it should look like after 30 seconds, nice and thick. So to that mixture, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of cream of tartar and then mix it again for another 30 seconds. This will help stabilize your mixture, your icing once it's set. This mixture, we're now going to add vanilla, and then I'm going to do all of the powdered sugar. Anytime that I make royal icing, I always sift my powdered sugar to make sure there's no clumps or lumps in it. If you want pure white frosting, you're gonna have to find some clear vanilla or use almond. I'm going to be tinting most of my icing, so I'm going to go ahead and use regular vanilla, which kind of has, will make it an off-white color instead of a pure white. So this package is exactly 2 pounds, so I'm going to be adding all of it using the sifter into my mixture, and then we're going to incorporate it all together with the stand mixer. Now we're done adding all the powdered sugar. We are going to set it on the stand mixer. So we've put that mixture onto the mixer with our paddle attachment. We're going to put it on low because all of that powdered sugar is right on top. Just for a few seconds while it gets all incorporated. I'm going to then scrape down the sides, and then I'm going to put it on medium for 10 minutes. Once your 10 minutes are up, you can see this is much thicker icing. And we're going to go from here. We will be making our 10-second icing. I'm gonna just scrape this off. Right. Then we are going to use a wet tea towel to cover this so that it doesn't dry up while we mix up our icings and fill our bags. After we make the royal icing, in order to do the decorations, I'm going to be using piping bags, couplers, tips that are numbers 1, 2, and 3, toothpicks, rubber bands, some glasses, and then some paper towels that I'm going to wet and put in the bottom of them. The 3 tips we have here are from the left, number 1, in the middle, number 2, and on the right, number 3. As you can see, the size of the openings gets progressively larger. I would use number 1 or number 2 in order to do detail work or outlines. I would only use 3 or 4 in order to do fill or flood icing. Now that the icing is finished mixing, I'm going to show you how to prep the decorator bags with the tip and coupler. You can do this while the machine is going for the 10 minutes. Obviously I didn't want to do it while my machine was going because then you couldn't hear me. So this just has some water in it. It's just for ease of use while I'm here. Make sure I can control how much water comes out. And I'm just going to wet a paper towel, put it in the bottom of a glass. And then I will be taking my bag, putting in the bottom half of the coupler. And you squeeze it all the way to the end till it can't go any further. And then with a pair of scissors, you're going to mark just past all of the threading. And then when you scooch the coupler back, you can see a little indent in the plastic, and just use your scissors to cut right across there. And you're going to squeeze the coupler down to the end. Cover the back end of the coupler with your tip, and then take the top and thread it around. Screw it on to the coupler underneath. Once you have that nice and tight, you're going to take it and put it in your cup, and then turn the outside around like this so that you have a holder and a place to put your icing directly in. So now that I have that prepped, go ahead and repeat that process and prep for however many colors you're going to be mixing and making. One very important part of making royal icing decorations or cookies is the consistency of the flood, fill, and outline icing. I prefer to make my icings all the same consistency so that I can change out tips between them. So I prefer a 10-second icing. I'm going to show you what that means, but here are the steps. I'm also going to start out with making a black icing so you can see what's going on with making that. Black does require a lot of food coloring in order for it to turn out actual black, but you can use whatever colors that you want for your decorations. So I'm going to uncover this. Take a bit of the icing. Then always make sure to recover your icing with a wet tea towel. Really don't want it to dry out because anything that dries out will be crusty and it will clog up your tips. I am using gel food coloring because it is much more pigmented, but you can use whatever you like. I do recommend, however, that you put the food coloring in first before you make your icing the right consistency, because especially if you're using a liquid-based food coloring, it's going to change the consistency of your icing as you add it. So do that first, and then we'll worry about adding some more water to it. This will probably look a little gray at first, but gel food coloring does darken as it sits and the color penetrates. So once we got the color mixed in a little bit, I'm going to add water a very little bit at a time. Keep in mind that it's much easier to add a little bit more water than to be able to try and change the consistency to make it thicker. It's always easy to make it thinner, so I always err on the side of a little bit on the thicker side, and mix as I go. So now that we've got it to the right consistency, I believe we're going to go ahead and test it and see if it does the 10-second test. Alright, so I'm going to draw the butter knife across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the top is completely flat, so we've got our 10-second icing. So we've got our 10-second icing, and I'm going to put the black into the tip that has a number 1 on it, because that's the smallest one, and we're going to do some details in the black. I'm going to turn that right side out. And then right above this line, I'm going to cinch it together, twist it, and then I'm going to put a rubber band around the end so that it all stays inside. And then we're just going to repeat with the white and the red. So I'm putting my red into my bag that has the number 3 tip, because I'm going to use the red mostly for fill or flood. So if you ever add too much water, make sure and save a little bit of the creamy icing to mix it back in order to make it a little stiffer. You don't want it to be too liquidy, because then it will just fall right off the cookie. can see that these colors have sat for a little bit. Black is much blacker, the red is much redder, and then we've got white. So now we can start decorating. So this is the rolled sugar cookie that I'm going to work with. It is completely cool. I made this one by using an egg cookie cutter, and we're going to turn it so that the thinnest part is at the bottom to be, the top is going to be the Spider-Man head, and then the bottom would be like where the chin is. I always, when I'm decorating with the royal icing, I always keep a wet paper towel nearby because the ends of these can get messy and I don't want it to drip onto the cookie or the decoration. So I'm gonna wipe it off, and then you're going to just make an outline. In order to keep all of the icing inside, we're gonna need to let that outline dry. So we start and kind of pull away just a little bit and let the icing drip onto the cookie so that it ends up being a nice even line. Come back around. So I'm going to show you real quick. I don't want it to run, but we just have a nice even line all the way around the outside of our cookie, and then we're going to let it dry before we fill it so that it acts kind of like a dam around the outside so that nothing will fall off the edge. Once the outline has dried, we're just going to fill it in. I'm going to start here. I like to obviously wipe it first, and then I like to get as close as I can to that outline. You could always do the outline in the contrasting color. In this case it would be black, but I like to make the outline kind of blend in instead of stick out. And then I just go in a spiral fashion all the way around until it's filled in to try and eliminate any chances for air bubbles. Then I'm going to tap it a couple times. Right around this outside edge, there's a little gap. So there's a little tiny drop of water that fell in, and I'm just smoothing that right back out. There we go. Because my hands were a little wet. So as you can see, I've let it sit for a little bit, and there's a couple bubbles that have come up, so I'm just going to pop those. And now I'm going to do the wet on wet technique, where I am going to pipe the black spider web directly onto the wet red background. Even pressure. Then I'm going to do a quick spiral. Go back and fill those little, I think those were little air bubbles that were in my bag. Now I'm going to just follow along the base of the spider web to pull these out. This is going to end up creating a little bit of a little arch in between each section. I'm just gonna pull towards the edge. Not ever going past that outline that's all the way around the outside. That one I made the mistake of going a little bit over with my icing, but a little bit of personality, I guess. I'm just going over each of these lines just to give that little arc in between. This one. Okay, gonna let this dry completely until it's no longer shiny, and then we'll take on the next step. So now you can see it's not shiny anymore, so I'm going to continue and go ahead and make a black outline for the eyes, let that dry, and then fill it in with the white. During any of the drying time, you can continue to decorate the other cookies and let them all get to the same stage. That way you're not wasting time. So I'm gonna go ahead and just follow this line up. And Spider-Man has that classic, it looks kind of like a teardrop a little bit, eye shape. Then I'm gonna let that dry and then come back in and fill it in with white. Using the same process, you can make the Spider-Man cookies in any sort of color configuration that you like. Here I've made the Miles Morales and the Gwen from Into the Spider-Verse versions.